So we're gonna continue on The Walking Dead, and we're on episode 3, Atlanta. At this point, Rick has gotten to the camp by the quarry, and they're just there. And something I noticed is like halfway through the episode, 23 minutes in, Shane brings water, and like all he says is like, boil before use. And in my sense, I'm like, does he filter it? Is there any way that they're filtering it? At this point, like, Shane is like a play it safe kind of guy. Like, that's all he wants to do. He doesn't want to do anything where, like, when Glenn shows up with the car, he's like, there's too much noise. There could be zombies coming in. Like, we need people to protect camp. Yada, yada, yada. Like, he just wants to play it safe in season 1. So at this point, I'm kind of like, is he not, filtering water? Like, that's kind of like a weird thing that I noticed there. And it's fairly easy, You could do it with a 5-gallon bucket, drill a bunch of holes, put a mesh, put sand, charcoal, sand, charcoal, sand, charcoal. And then at the top, you could put, pebbles, and then another like mesh to basically pull out any twigs or whatever out of there, and that would basically filter water, and then you would boil it. So I feel like if Glenn's going to town, to Atlanta, to get all these supplies and everything, and they haven't thought about like, hey, we need to filter water too, it's kind of like, I don't think they show anything like that throughout the whole show either, like any of them filtering any water. And then again, they're getting water from the quarry, so I don't know how clean that is. I don't know like what's going on with that. So I feel like, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of weird. Like how I noticed that. Like, oh yeah, like filter water. And in my case, I got well water. Like I'm drinking well water right now. Like it's a closed system. It goes from well to pressure tanks to the house, and then if anything happens from like, from out of the well to the pressure tanks, there's a check valve, so no water goes back to the well to contaminate it, and then that comes in here. But then people are still kind of reluctant to drink well water sometimes, and I'm just like, it's fine, you can drink bottled water. Like I don't have a big deal with it, but like compared to like now, where like my water is like clean and filtered, to just getting water from the quarry is kind of like, yeah, I don't know. The other thing is I have another system, which is an open system, which basically goes from well to valve to check valve to the tank. And the tank fills up, and then I turn on the pump to the garden, and it waters the garden. And the reason I don't have that connected to the house is because the tank has a little valve on top that pushes air out when the tank gets filled with water, and it allows air in when the water depletes from the tank. And I have noticed that bugs get in from that little opening of the air valve. So I don't want it to be rotting away, like bugs and animals be rotting away in my tank, and then I'll be drinking that water. So that's another thing about like the quarry, where they're just like, boil before use. I know boiling can do a lot of work, but I just feel that, that filtration system with like 2 5-gallon buckets would do it very good, And if it's a quarry, there should be like bugs and everything in that stuff. So yeah, so I don't know. So something's weird about that scene, I don't feel like it's correctly, added. But then again, I also understand it's the beginning of the show. It's the beginning of like the zombie apocalypse. They're probably like 2 months in, and maybe they don't know anything about that. So that's understandable. But yeah, something like if they knew about filtration system, I'm sure if Glenn would have gone to town, bring 2 5-gallon buckets, and then like a bag of charcoal or 2 bags of charcoal or some shit like that. And then they'll be able to get the rest of the stuff around the quarry. So, so right after that, there's a zombie that comes into camp. It's eating a deer. The kids are scared. They all, like, six people run after them, and they start beating the zombie. And you know, this is where, like, Shane is playing it safe. Like, he's always playing it safe on this episode. And then they kill the zombie, and then Daryl comes out, and then he talks about, like, oh, should we can we cut around it and eat the rest of the deer? And they're like, no, we're not gonna risk it. And it's just like, you're risking it with the water, like, how is it? And I think somebody mentions that, like, I think Herschel mentions that, like, in season 4 or something, where they're talking about, like you take a sip of water, you're risking your life, which is absolutely true, because in a world where, like, there's a collapse, there's a society collapse. Like it doesn't matter if, like, you're drinking, like, water from, like, the tap. There's a sort of a system that's kind of like cleaning your water. So if there's no system that's cleaning your water, then you go back to basically, like, the dark ages, where, like, any water could be basically contaminated. There's even water, like, around the world now that can be contaminated. So, you know, not just a case of, like, the zombies in the show, but, like, in real life, there's parts of the world where, like, water's contaminated. So, so that's why I feel uneasy on, like, the whole fact of, like, Shane's trying to play it safe, but he's not really playing it safe. And then another thing with that zombie and the deer is kind of like Daryl shoots it with an arrow, and then he just gets the arrow and wipes it off in his pants, and he puts it back in the quiver. And I'm like, wait, nobody's gonna mention that? Like, you just killed a zombie and you just put it back in your quiver. Like, don't you have your zombie killing arrows separate from the hunting arrows? So, like, even then, it's kind of like they're playing it safe, where, like, let's not eat around, the deer that the zombie just ate, but they're using the same arrows to kill animals and zombies. So that's just something that I'm just kind of like, yeah, that's kind of weird. And then going back to the whole, like, water thing, they're washing clothes in the quarry. So that's something that also was like, what's up with that? Not the fact that they're washing clothes, but the fact that, like, Shane gets water from the quarry, and they're washing clothes in the quarry. So does he get his water from, like, another spot of the quarry, or does he get it from that spot where they're, like, washing clothes? Another thing, they might just be washing clothes, like, just to get rid of the dirt from the clothes, instead of actual, like, using soap and stuff like that. But, like, compared to, like, the size of the quarry and where they're washing clothes, I know it will get diluted over time. But, like, where is Shane getting his water? Like, that's one thing that I'm kind of confused there. As they're washing clothes, right there. And I think in the next episode, they get fish from the quarry, and then they're starting. And in this episode, they're trying to catch frogs, and so it's kind of like there's all these stuff in the water, and yet they're also washing clothes in the water. So that also begs the question to, like, the first thing where, like, they're boiling the water without filtering it. So, I know that boiling it does a lot, but maybe filtering it might be a little bit better. But that's the one thing. Like, they're also washing clothes in the quarry, which is also introducing another outdoor element to the water itself. So there's this one scene here that I really don't want to talk about, but we're already here, so let's talk about it. Shane beating up Ed. It's hard to talk about it just because, like, different perspectives and views of the whole situation. I know in a future episode, Jim mentions that it's their marriage. But yeah, that's messed up, man. Just the fact that you're acknowledging that it's okay for Ed to hit his wife is messed up. Even though if it's their marriage, it's messed up. The other thing is like, in a future season, Carol goes to like a spot to hide out, and it's a spot where she says that her and Sophia used to hide out in these places when Ed used to be Ed, and so you get to at that point you get a sense that if you remember from like all the way to season one, you get a sense that Ed was abusive to Carol and Sophia their whole life, and yeah, that's a no for me. Absolutely not. If in the future like zombies happen, we gotta bug out or bug in into my property on my land, I would not want that happening around in my group at all. You know, if there's an argument, there's an argument. But once it's abuse, it's abuse, you know. And I feel that Carol in the show has been getting abuse physically, mentally, spiritually, in all sorts of ways. I maybe even sexually. That it's just too much. It's just like nah, you know. Ed should have been eliminated. And another thing is that you know when Ed was getting beat up by Shane, the girls are like, "Oh no, don't beat him up, don't beat him up." And it's kind of like, what do they want? They want Ed to be in a timeout. That's not gonna do anything. If Shane would have done like a 1-2 punch, it wouldn't have done anything. And also like in today's modern era and age where basically there's help and counseling and all this stuff, like if you don't want help, someone helping you is not going to do anything. You actually want to have help and for yourself to change for it to work. When someone forces you to change, it's not going to happen. So Ed not seeking help before the zombie fell, in the zombie world, he was not going to change. So that's just the fact of that. And also, Ed's a fucking pedophile. In season 2, Carol mentions that Ed had all these thoughts on Sophia and her little girl. So, you know, Ed is a fucking pedophile. And nope, I would not have that. Fuck that shit. I would beat the shit out of Ed just like Shane did. And you know what? If I would not stop, I think. So I'm all for Ed getting beat up. I know that it's kind of one of those conversations that's kind of hard just to have like a, you know, like a minute conversation on, but I would beat the shit out of Ed. You know, and that's pretty much the end of this episode on episode 3 of season 1. I know it's kind of weird ending it on that notion, but that's kind of what it is. You know, skeptical prepper out, prepare to survive, but let's be honest, you'll probably die like Ed.